Jack Carter pressed both palms flat against the bathroom sink, leaned in, and stared at the man in the mirror like he didn't recognize him. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. His hands that had held a rifle in 3 deployments, hands that had never once shaken under fire, were shaking right now. Because of a dress. Because of 7 words. "You look beautiful." That's all he'd said. 7 words. And Emily had gone completely still, looked at him with those eyes that saw straight through every wall he'd ever built, smiled like she'd just found something she'd stopped looking for, and said, "You didn't mean the dress." Jack turned on the cold water. Stood there. Let it run over his wrists. 2 years. 2 years of rules. 2 years of discipline. 2 years of telling himself that what he felt was just comfort, just habit, just the natural warmth of a good friendship, and she'd dismantled all of it in 1 sentence. She knew. She had always known. And now there was no going back to pretending. Drop your city in the comments right now. I need to see how far this story reaches. And if you're watching this without subscribing, fix that before part 2. Trust me, you don't want to walk into that hallway scene cold. The apartment on Greystone Avenue was never supposed to feel like a home. That was the rule Jack Carter had set for himself the day he signed the lease 3 years ago, when the Navy reassigned him stateside, and he showed up with a 7-year-old daughter, 2 duffel bags, and the kind of silence that follows a man who's learned not to ask for too much. It was a place to sleep. A place to raise Lily. A place to decompress between deployments, between shifts at the base, between the long stretches of time where he wore his discipline like a second uniform and kept every emotional door in his life bolted shut. That was the plan. Then Emily Hayes moved in. It started practically. The way most dangerous things do. Jack had known Emily for almost 4 years through his buddy Marcus, who'd dated her college roommate, who'd dragged Jack to some rooftop birthday party in July, where Emily had shown up an hour late, laughing about a burnt souffle she'd attempted as a hostess gift. Holding nothing but a bottle of cheap Prosecco, and the kind of energy that made every person in the room turn toward her without knowing why. Jack hadn't turned. Not at first. He'd been the guy near the railing scanning exits out of habit, half present the way off-duty military men sometimes are, always calculating, never quite all the way in the room. But then she'd said something across the patio, something genuinely unexpectedly funny, and he'd laughed before he could stop himself. A real laugh. The kind that surprised him. She'd looked over, made eye contact, gave him a small, knowing nod like, "Yeah, I saw that, Navy." He looked away, but something registered. They stayed in each other's orbit after that. Group dinners, Marcus's poker nights, a 4th of July cookout. Nothing significant. Just the low background hum of 2 people who exist in the same social world and occasionally speak. Then Ryan happened. Ryan Miller, the man Emily had given 3 years of her life to. The man who proposed to her in October, set a date in June, and by February had quietly begun dismantling every plan they'd built together. No screaming fight, no dramatic confrontation, just a slow, suffocating withdrawal. Fewer calls returned, more evenings unaccounted for, until Emily showed up at a mutual friend's birthday dinner to find Ryan already there with someone else, laughing too easily, not even startled to see her walk in. She didn't cause a scene. That was the part that wrecked Jack when Marcus told him later. She just walked back out. Got in her car, drove home, sat in her parking lot for 40 minutes, and then called her landlord and gave 30 days' notice on an apartment she could no longer afford alone. Marcus was the one who floated the idea. "She just needs a few months," he told Jack. "Just until she stabilizes. You've got that second room that's basically storage." "No," Jack said. "Jack, she's going through something. I don't need that energy around Lily." "She's good with Lily. You know that." Jack knew that. That was the problem. "It's a bad idea," he said. "It's a guest room and a functioning human being who needs 3 months to get back on her feet. That's it." 3 months. That's what Jack told himself when he said yes. The first week was awkward in the specific, almost clinical way that 2 people sharing unfamiliar space are awkward too. Polite, too careful. Always aware of where the other person was in the apartment. Emily kept apologizing for things that didn't require apologies. For being in the kitchen when he came home. for the smell of her baking, for a pan she'd left to soak. "You don't have to do that," Jack told her on day 4. "It's your space too." She'd looked at him like he'd said something unexpectedly kind. "I don't want to be in the way," she said. "You're not." She nodded and went back to what she was doing. But something shifted after that. Some small, imperceptible valve opened. By the end of week 2, Lily had adopted Emily with the particular fierceness that only 7-year-olds are capable of. It happened over pancakes. Emily had been up early. She always was habit from her bakery job and had made a full stack without thinking the way you cook when you cook for yourself, and then realize the kitchen just decided for you. Lily had wandered out in her pajamas, seen the pancakes, and looked at Emily with the expression of someone who has just discovered that life can in fact be good. "Are those for me?" Lily asked. "They're for whoever gets here first," Emily said. "You're here first." Lily climbed onto the bar stool, accepted a plate, and said with complete seriousness, "I think you should live here forever." Jack, standing in the hallway having heard all of this, made the calculated decision to go back to his room and pretend he needed another 60 seconds to put on his watch. 3 months became 4. 4 became 6. Nobody mentioned it. The storage room became a real room. Emily's photography prints went up on one wall. Not many, just 3. All landscapes, all places she'd been and wanted to remember. A small string of lights over her bookshelf. A coffee mug with a ceramic crack she'd repaired herself, a Japanese art technique she'd read about called kintsugi, fixing broken things with gold. Jack noticed it and didn't say anything. But he thought about it more than once. They built routines the way people do when they're not paying attention. Emily made coffee every morning, always too much, always left enough in the pot for Jack with the heat turned down low so it wouldn't burn. He never asked her to. She just did. Jack fixed things. The loose cabinet hinge she mentioned once in passing 3 days before, he just quietly fixed it. The window latch that stuck. The bathroom light that flickered. She didn't ask him to. He just did. On Sundays, they cooked together not by arrangement, but by gravitational pull. Emily would start something and Jack would come in to grab water, and somehow 20 minutes later he'd be chopping vegetables, while she narrated what she was doing with the particular intensity of someone who genuinely loved the process, not just the result. Lily would sit on the counter and offer opinions that were not asked for. It was, Jack thought, more than once the closest thing to a normal Sunday he could remember. He did not examine that thought. He had rules. He'd had them for a long time. Rule 1, don't complicate what's working. Rule 2, don't let comfort become confusion. Rule 3, Lily comes first. Always. The moment anything threatened that stability, it was over. He recited them to himself the way a soldier memorizes a checklist automatically, without emotion, in the precise order they needed to hold. Because he wasn't a man who acted on feeling. He was a man who acted on decision. And he had decided a long time ago that after his marriage ended quietly, without cruelty, but with the particular devastation of 2 people who'd tried their best and still failed, that the part of him built for that kind of love was retired. Not dead. Retired. There was a difference. He kept telling himself there was a difference. The first time the rules got loud was a Tuesday in March. He'd come home late from base past 10 and found Emily asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest, the television on low, and Lily curled up against her side also asleep. They hadn't meant to. Emily had offered to put Lily to bed while he was running behind, and somewhere between chapter 4 and whatever was on cable they'd both just gone under. Jack stood in the doorway for longer than he should have. Something moved in his chest that he did not have a name for, or maybe had a name for, and refused to say. He turned off the television, carried Lily to her room without waking her, came back out, took the book off Emily's chest without waking her either, and went to bed. Lay there in the dark for a long time. Told himself it was nothing. Rules 1 through 3 in order. It was nothing. Emily never talked about Ryan, not directly. Occasionally something would surface, a reference to a restaurant they'd gone to, a habit she'd had to unlearn, a weekend trip she'd almost mentioned before catching herself. Jack never pushed. But once on a Thursday night when Lily was at a sleepover and the apartment was quieter than usual, Emily had poured herself a glass of wine and said without preamble, "Do you ever feel like you were in love with the idea of someone more than the actual person?" Jack looked up from his book. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." "How did you know? When did you figure it out?" "When the actual person left," he said. "And I was sadder about the version of my life I'd imagined than I was about losing her." Emily was quiet for a moment. "That's either very honest or very sad," she said. "Probably both." She looked at her wine, then at him. "I think I knew before he left," she said quietly. "I just didn't want to be the kind of person who gave up." "You didn't give up," Jack said. "You got walked out on. Those aren't the same thing." She looked at him sharply, then something in her expression softened. "Nobody's said it like that before," she said. "It's the truth," he said, and looked back at his book. But his hands had stopped moving, and the words on the page stopped registering, and rule number 2 put in a long, difficult shift that night. Spring came slowly that year. Lily turned 8 and demanded a birthday party with a specific theme that shifted 3 times in the planning stages. Emily quietly managed the decorations and the cake, a lemon cake with purple frosting, because Lily had changed her mind from pink at the last possible moment, and Emily had simply made it work. Jack watched her manage that situation with the kind of calm problem-solving that he respected in people. No fuss, no drama, just execution, and thought not for the first time that Emily Hayes was not someone who happened to be in his apartment. She was someone who had, without ceremony or announcement, become essential to it. He didn't like knowing that. It complicated rules 1 through 3. The night that broke everything open started on a Wednesday. Emily had been quieter than usual all day. Not visibly upset, she was too controlled for visible upset, but operating on a slightly lower frequency. Less singing in the kitchen, shorter answers. A kind of careful stillness that Jack had learned over months of paying closer attention than he intended to meant something was working on her from the inside. He didn't ask immediately. That wasn't how they worked. He gave her space the way she gave him space, with the confidence of 2 people who'd learned each other's rhythms. But when Lily went to bed and the apartment settled, Emily came out of her room holding something he didn't expect. A red dress. Not on her. Just held up. An honest, simple question on her face. "I need to go somewhere tomorrow night," she said. "Is this too much?" Jack looked at the dress, then at her. He'd seen Emily in 100 configurations flower on her jaw at 7 in the morning, oversized sweatshirts on the couch, dressed up for work events, dressed down for long Sundays. He knew her face in all of them. But the question she was actually asking was not about the dress. He knew that. And something in him, something that had been following orders and holding position for 2 years, looked at her, holding that dress with tomorrow in her eyes, and quietly went off duty. "Where are you going?" he asked. She paused. "Ryan's engagement party." The apartment got very quiet. Jack didn't move. He absorbed that information the way he'd been trained to absorb incoming data without visible reaction, with the flat, controlled exterior of a man deciding what to do with something dangerous. Ryan Miller was engaged. Ryan, who had walked Emily out of a 3-year relationship and apparently rebuilt his life with someone new fast enough to already be throwing a party about. It was now pulling her back into orbit, even now, even from a distance. And Emily was going. And she was standing in front of him, holding a red dress, asking if it was too much. Jack looked at the dress one more time. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and said the truest thing he'd said in 2 years, "You look beautiful." Emily went very still. And then slowly she smiled. A quiet smile. Not a surprised one. The smile of someone who had maybe been waiting for a sentence to arrive. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said softly, "You didn't mean the dress." And Jack Carter, disciplined, rule-following, retired from feeling Jack Carter, said nothing, because she was right, and they both knew it. And everything that came after that sentence was no longer about Ryan Miller, or the red dress, or an engagement party on the other side of the city. It was about 2 people standing in a hallway, finally out of places to hide. She said it so quietly that for a half second Jack thought he'd imagined it, But he hadn't. He knew he hadn't, because her eyes didn't move from his and Emily Hayes when she was being polite or careful or simply filling silence, always looked slightly away. Always found something neutral to land on. A habit he'd noticed 6 months ago and never mentioned. She wasn't looking away now. "You didn't mean the dress," she said again. Softer this time. Not a question, not an accusation. Just a fact. She was laying on the table between them, steady and patient, waiting to see what he'd do with it. Jack said nothing. That was in itself an answer. Emily folded the red dress over her arm slowly. She leaned one shoulder against the hallway wall and looked at him the way she sometimes looked at something she was figuring out how to fix. Quiet, focused, without judgment. "Jack, I know what I said." "I know you know." She paused. "That's what I'm talking about." He exhaled slowly through his nose, crossed his arms, looked at the floor for exactly 1 second, then back at her because looking away felt like retreat, and he was not a man who retreated. "You should get some sleep," he said. "You've got a long night tomorrow." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "The military exit," she said. "Where you decide the conversation is over and you just close the door on it. You've done it to me twice before, and both times I let it go because I wasn't ready either." She shifted the dress to her other arm. "I'm ready now." "Emily, tell me I'm wrong," she said. "Look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong, and I will drop it. I will go to Ryan's party tomorrow. I will smile. I will come home, and we will never talk about this again." She held his gaze. "But you have to look at me and say it." Jack looked at her. The hallway was quiet. Lily was asleep. The whole apartment was holding its breath. He said nothing. Emily nodded slowly. Not triumphantly. There was nothing victorious in her expression. Just something careful and a little sad and very, very honest. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay doesn't mean anything," Jack said. "It means I heard you." She pushed off the wall and turned toward her room, then stopped. Didn't turn back around. Just spoke to the hallway in front of her. "For what it's worth, I'm not going tomorrow because I want to see him. I'm going because I need to stop being afraid of what it feels like to be in the same room as my own past." Jack stared at the back of her head. "And I need to know," she continued, her voice dropping just slightly, "that it doesn't mean anything anymore. That he doesn't." A beat. "I need to know that for myself. Not for you. Not for us. For me." She went into her room and closed the door behind her. Not a slam. Not a statement. Just a door closing. Jack stood in the hallway for a long time after that. Then he went to his room, lay down on top of the covers with his boots still on, and stared at the ceiling like it owed him an explanation. He didn't sleep for a long time. In the morning, Emily was already up. Of course she was. The coffee was made. The right amount in the pot, heat turned low exactly the way she always left it. Jack stood in the kitchen in yesterday's shirt and looked at that coffee pot for a moment longer than necessary, then poured himself a cup and sat down at the counter. Emily was at the stove. Something that smelled like cinnamon and butter. She didn't turn around when he came in, but her shoulders changed a nearly invisible adjustment. The kind of thing you only notice if you've spent enough months watching someone to know what their body does when it's aware of you. "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you too. Did you sleep at all?" "Some." She turned then, spatula in hand, and looked at him with the particular directness that had always been one of the things he respected most about her. Emily never softened her observations to make them more comfortable. She just handed you the truth and trusted you to handle it. "You look like a man who argued with himself all night," she said. "Only lost twice," he said. Something flickered in her expression, almost a smile. She turned back to the stove. "Lily's going to be up in 10 minutes. She has a thing at school the science fair set up. I told her I'd braid her hair." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She slid eggs onto a plate and set it in front of him. "I want to. Eat that." He ate. They didn't talk about the hallway. They talked about Lily's science project, a working model of a water filtration system that Emily had quietly helped engineer over 3 weekends, despite having zero engineering background and considerable creativity. They talked about whether the baking job Emily had interviewed for downtown was worth the commute. They talked about nothing and everything, the way they'd learned to over months of shared mornings. And the whole time Jack was thinking about what she'd said the night before. I need to know that it doesn't mean anything anymore. She was going to walk into a room full of Ryan Miller's people in a red dress and prove something to herself. He understood that. He respected it even. He knew what it meant to need to face something on your own terms before you could move past it. He just hadn't expected it to feel like swallowing broken glass. Lily came out of her room at full volume the way she always did, as if sleep was simply an interruption, and real life resumed at maximum capacity the moment she opened her eyes. Emily. She stopped at the kitchen doorway and pointed with the solemnity of someone issuing a military directive. You promised French braid. I remember. Dad can't do French braids. Your dad has many other skills, Emily said without looking at Jack. He made a ponytail once that looked like a failed science experiment, Lily said. That was one time, Jack said. The rubber band snapped in class. We've moved past this as a family. Lily climbed onto the bar stool next to Jack, grabbed a piece of his toast without asking, and looked between the two of them with the unsettling perceptiveness that 8-year-olds sometimes deployed without warning. Are you guys in a fight? She asked. No, they said simultaneously. Lily looked unconvinced. You're doing the quiet thing. We're always quiet in the morning, Jack said. Not this quiet. She chewed the toast. This is the kind of quiet that happened when Tyler's parents got divorced. Nobody's getting divorced, Emily said carefully. We aren't. I know you're not married, Lily said patiently. I'm just saying it's that kind of quiet. She hopped off the stool and held out her hair. Braid. Emily met Jack's eyes over the top of Lily's head for exactly 1 second. Something passed between them, not quite amusement, not quite pain. Something in between. Come here, Emily said. And Lily followed her to the couch, already talking about her science fair display setup. Already on to the next thing, leaving the kitchen to Jack and the particular silence his 8-year-old had just named with uncomfortable precision. He drank his coffee and listened to Emily laugh at something Lily said and thought clearly for the first time, I am not okay with her going tonight. That was new. Not the feeling. The honesty of it. He drove Lily to school. Emily wasn't there when he got back. She'd gone to her shift at the bakery, which started at 9 and ran until 3, which gave her exactly enough time to come home, get ready, and leave for an event Jack had not been invited to, and had no standing to object to. He knew that. He sat at the kitchen counter with his second cup of coffee, and he knew that. He pulled out his phone, put it down, picked it up again, opened a text thread with Marcus, and typed, Did you know Ryan Miller is engaged? 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, yeah. Saw it on Instagram last month. Why? Jack stared at that response. Last month. Marcus had known for a month and hadn't mentioned it. He'd known Emily was living with Jack. He'd made the introduction. He'd set this whole living situation in motion. And he'd seen that engagement announcement and apparently decided it was not information that required passing along. Jack typed Emily's going to his party tonight. The response came fast. Oh, yeah, that's Jack. What? How are you doing with that? Jack put his phone face down on the counter. That was a question he was not prepared to answer by text. He was not entirely sure he was prepared to answer it at all. The afternoon moved slowly in the way that afternoons do when you're waiting for something you can't stop and didn't ask for. He cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. Did an hour on the rowing machine in the second bedroom. Read 4 pages of the same chapter 3 times. Picked Lily up from school and listened to a detailed account of the science fair setup that he absorbed maybe 40% of, because the other 60% of his attention was doing math on what time Emily would be home and how much time that left before she left again. At 5:15, he heard her key in the lock. She came in carrying a bakery box and looking tired in the specific way that comes from being on your feet for 6 hours, and she stopped when she saw him at the table and said, "I brought you a croissant," and set the box down, and for about 30 seconds it was just a normal Tuesday. Then she said, "I have to start getting ready," and the normal Tuesday ended. "Okay," Jack said. She headed for her room, stopped, turned. "Jack?" "I'm not going to say anything," he said. "I know you're not." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not what I was going to say." He waited. "I need tonight to be about me," she said. "Not about him. Not about whatever this is." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. "Me proving to myself that I can walk into a room that used to own me and walk back out without losing anything." Her voice was steady, not defensive, just clear. "Can you understand that?" "Yes," Jack said, and meant it. She held his gaze for a moment, checking she always checked, and then she nodded once and went to her room. Jack sat at the table and understood it completely and hated every second of it. She came out at 7:45. Red dress, hair down, small gold earrings that he'd never seen before. She was looking at her phone when she walked into the hallway, and she said without looking up, "The Uber's 4 minutes out, I just need to..." And then she looked up and stopped talking. Jack was standing at the kitchen counter. He'd changed his shirt without consciously deciding to. He didn't fully know why. She looked at him. He looked at her. "You look beautiful," he said, and his voice came out quieter than intended. Quieter and more certain, which was a combination he hadn't expected. Emily went very still. Not surprised. Not exactly. More like arrived. Like someone who had been walking toward a specific place for a long time and had just looked up and found it. She studied him for a moment. The phone in her hand went dark. She didn't look at it. "You didn't mean the dress," she said softly. "No," Jack said, for the first time. Out loud. Clearly. "I didn't." The apartment was completely quiet. Somewhere outside, a car moved down the street. From Lily's room, the low sound of cartoons. The refrigerator hum. All of it distant, like the whole world had politely stepped back 10 feet to give them the room. Emily looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the hallway the night before. Not with triumph, not with surprise, but with something raw and careful and very real. "I have to go," she said. Her voice was soft. "I know." "Jack." "Go," he said. "Do what you need to do." He held her gaze. "Come home." Something moved across her face. Something she didn't fully let surface. "Okay," she said. Her Uber arrived. She walked out, and Jack Carter stood in an empty hallway in a shirt he'd changed for reasons he couldn't explain, and felt every locked door inside him rattle on its hinges at once. He put Lily to bed at 8:30. Read her 2 chapters of the book they'd been going through. She'd started inserting her own commentary between paragraphs, which doubled the reading time, and which he secretly loved. When she finally settled, she grabbed his hand before he stood up. "Is Emily coming back?" Lily asked. "She'll be back later," Jack said. "She's out tonight." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "She always comes back." Jack looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said. "She does." He turned off her light and pulled her door halfway shut and stood in the hallway, the same hallway again, and the sentence stayed with him. "She always comes back." He went to the living room, sat on the couch, turned on something he didn't watch. His phone was on the cushion next to him, face up, volume on. 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10. He was still there at 10:47 when his phone buzzed. Not a call. A text. From Emily. 3 words. "I'm outside." "Come down." Jack looked at the message. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys out of habit, and went downstairs without stopping to think about what that text meant, or what he was going to say, or what happened next. Because some things he was beginning to understand you didn't plan for. Some things you just walked toward. She was sitting on the front steps when he got downstairs. Not in the Uber. Not standing on the sidewalk with her phone out the way people wait when they're ready to move. She was sitting on the concrete steps of the building, heels off, both shoes in one hand, the red dress pulled slightly over her knees, and she was looking at nothing in particular. Jack pushed through the front door and stopped. She looked up. Her mascara hadn't run. She hadn't been crying, or if she had, she'd handled it the way she handled most things, quietly and completely, before anyone could see. But her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. The way eyes look when something inside finally lets go of a weight it's been carrying for a long time. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He came down the last 2 steps and sat down beside her. Not too close, just present. She looked back out at the street. A cab moved past. Somewhere down the block, someone was laughing on a phone call, walking fast, completely in their own world. The city doing its thing, indifferent and constant. Jack waited. He'd learned in the months of living alongside Emily that she processed things in her own order and at her own pace, and that the most useful thing he could do when something was working in her was not fill the silence. So he sat with her on the cold concrete steps, and he waited. After about a minute, she said, "He looked happy." Jack said nothing. Like genuinely happy, not performing happy, not the version of happy he used to do at parties where I could always tell the difference. She turned the heel of one shoe in her hand slowly. Real happy. With her. She paused. "She seems good. For him." "Okay," Jack said. I shook her hand, Emily said. I introduced myself, said congratulations. A quiet exhale. Ryan looked at me like he was waiting for a scene, and I just didn't give him one. I talked to 3 people I used to know, I had 1 glass of wine, and then I stood in the corner and waited to feel something devastating. She stopped. "Did you?" Jack asked. She thought about it honestly, the way she always answered questions she took seriously. "No," she said. "That's the part I'm still processing." She finally looked at him. "I kept waiting for it to hit. The grief. The anger. Some version of this should have been mine. And it just didn't come." She shook her head slightly. "I felt sad. A little. But mostly I just felt like I was watching something that had nothing to do with me anymore." Jack looked at her steadily. "That's not nothing," he said. "I know." She looked back at the street. It felt like the last chapter of a book closing. You know that feeling? When you're sad it's over, but you also know it was supposed to end there. She was quiet a moment. "I just didn't expect it to feel like relief." "Why not?" "Because I spent 8 months thinking if I ever had to face that moment, I would fall apart." She said it simply, without drama. And I didn't fall apart. I just stood there, in a red dress, and felt fine. She almost laughed. Which is somehow more disorienting than falling apart would have been. Jack understood that in a specific first-hand way. The things you brace for that don't break you. The aftermath that looks nothing like what you rehearsed. He'd had that experience twice in his life, once after a mission that went wrong and somehow went right at the same time, and once when his marriage ended and he'd waited for destruction and gotten quiet instead. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can always ask me something. Why did you text me to come down? You could have just come back upstairs." Emily was quiet for a moment. Her thumb moved over the strap of one of her heels slowly. "Because I didn't want to walk back into that apartment and pretend tonight was just a normal night," she said. "And I didn't want to have the conversation inside." She glanced at him. "I needed somewhere with no walls." Jack nodded slowly. "And I needed it to be you," she said quieter. "Not a phone call to a girlfriend. Not Marcus. You." He sat with that. "Emily," he started. "Don't manage this," she said, not harshly, just directly. "Don't do the thing where you get careful and controlled, and you hand me a version of what you're thinking that's been through the military filter first." She turned to face him more fully. "I'm sitting on concrete steps in a party dress at 11 o'clock at night because I drove past 4 blocks of city on the way home and asked the Uber to stop here instead. I'm a little past careful." Jack looked at her. She was right. She was completely right. And the thing inside him that was always reaching for structure, for procedure, for the managed response, it had nothing left to grab onto. "When you walked out the door tonight," he said carefully, "I sat on that couch for 3 hours and watched a television show I cannot tell you a single thing about." She didn't say anything, and the whole time I was thinking about a rule I made for myself a long time ago, he continued. About not letting comfort become something else, about keeping things clean, uncomplicated. "Okay," she said, "and the whole time I was thinking about that rule." He stopped. "I kept thinking how stupid it would be to follow it." Emily looked at him, not with surprise, not with the relief of someone hearing something they'd been afraid wouldn't come, with the steadiness of someone who had been waiting patiently in the truth for a while and was now watching someone else finally find their way to it. "How long?" she asked. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Long enough that I can't give you a specific date." "Months." "Yeah." She exhaled slowly. "Me too," she said. "I know." She blinked. "You know, you reorganized my bookshelves," he said. "By color, without asking, 6 months ago. Nobody does that to someone's stuff unless they're comfortable enough to think of it as partly their own." She stared at him. "You noticed that and didn't say anything." "I put them back," he said. "Alphabetically. The next morning." "I thought that was Lily." "It was me." "That was passive-aggressive. That was self-preservation," he said. And for the first time all night she laughed. A real one, short and surprised and warm, the kind of laugh that happened before she could decide whether to let it out. Jack felt something release in his chest. They sat with the laugh for a moment. Then it faded, and what was left underneath it was quieter and more serious, but somehow lighter for having been there. "So, what do we do with this?" Emily asked. "I don't know," Jack said. "I've been trying to figure that out since March." "March," she repeated. "The couch." He looked at her. "You knew about that." "I woke up when you took the book off my chest," she said. "I felt you pull Lily's blanket up before you carried her to bed." A small pause. "I kept my eyes closed." Jack stared at her. "You pretended to be asleep." "I needed a minute," she said simply. "A minute to do what? To not make a decision yet," she said. "Because the moment I opened my eyes, it would have been a decision, and I wasn't—" She stopped, looked at her hands. "I wasn't ready to risk what we had, what Lily had." She looked back up at him. "You three had something that worked. Lily was happy. You were not happy exactly, but stable. Good. And I didn't want to be the thing that broke that." Jack was quiet for a moment, absorbing that. "You thought about Lily," he said. "Of course I thought about Lily," Emily said like it was obvious. "She's not a footnote, Jack. She's—" She stopped, shook her head. "She matters to me. Whatever happens with us, whatever this is or isn't, she matters to me separately." Something moved in Jack's chest that had nothing to do with rules and nothing to do with discipline and everything to do with the specific, unguarded weight of a man who had been alone in his love for his daughter for longer than he'd admitted. "Emily, I'm not trying to make this complicated," she said quickly. "I'm just saying she's part of why I was careful, part of why I waited." "Waited for what?" She looked at him. Steady, honest, all the way honest. "To be sure," she said, "that what I feel is real and not just gratitude, or proximity, or the rebound version of love that looks real and isn't." She held his gaze. "After Ryan, I swore I would never again mistake the feeling of being safe with someone for the feeling of being in love with them. So I waited until I was sure I knew the difference." "And," Jack said. "And," she said quietly, "I know the difference." The street was quiet. The laugh from down the block was gone. The cab traffic had thinned. The city had settled into that specific late-night stillness that belonged to people who were somewhere they'd chosen to be. Jack looked at Emily Hayes, sitting on the front steps of his building, in a red dress with her shoes in her hand and her mascara perfect, and her eyes completely open, and he thought with the clarity that only came when you stopped arguing with yourself that every rule he'd ever made was written for a person he was no longer being. "I'm scared," he said. It came out before the filter caught it. He didn't take it back. Emily looked at him with something that could only be described as recognition. "Me too," she said. "I'm terrified." "Of what specifically?" "That it changes things." "It already changed things," he said. "Somewhere around March." "That it breaks something," she said. "That we do this and it doesn't work and Lily loses." She stopped. "I know," he said. "And I lose the only place that's felt like home since—" She stopped again. Harder this time. Jack watched her work through it. He didn't rush her. "Since Ryan," she finished quietly. "Since before Ryan, honestly. I've been looking for somewhere I just fit. Without performing. Without managing. And I found it in this ridiculous apartment with a man who alphabetizes his books as an emotional defense strategy, and a little girl who adopted me over pancakes." Her voice had gone slightly uneven. She controlled it. "And I am very aware of how much I have to lose if we get this wrong." "Yeah," Jack said. "So I need you to understand that," she said. "If we do this, whatever this is, I need you to understand I'm not coming in with nothing to lose. I'm coming in with everything." He held her gaze. "So am I," he said. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face the way she sometimes did when she was deciding whether to believe something, not because she thought he was lying, but because she needed to know if he knew what he was saying. He did. She could see that he did. She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Emily's phone buzzed from inside her small purse, and she looked at it reflexively. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just a shift around the eyes. A tightening. "Ryan?" Jack asked. She turned the phone so he could see the screen without handing it to him. "Hey, I saw you leave early. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Can we talk sometime? I feel like there's still things that were never said." Jack read it twice. He said nothing. Emily looked at it for a long moment, then looked at Jack. "He spent 8 months not saying things," she said. "And now he wants to say them." Her thumb hovered over the screen. "While he's engaged." "What do you want to do?" Jack asked. She looked at the message again. "I want to not let him back in," she said. "Not because of you. Not because of tonight. Because I finally—" She pressed her lips together. "I finally feel like I got out from under it. And I don't want to go back under." "Then don't," Jack said. Just like that. Just like that, he said. "You don't owe him a conversation. You don't owe him closure. You gave him years. He gave you a parking lot." His voice was even. Not angry, just clear. "Whatever he needs to say is for him, not for you." Emily stared at the message for 3 more seconds. Then she locked her phone without responding and put it back in her purse. She sat with that decision for a moment, the way you sit with something after you've done it, not doubting it, just feeling the weight of it settle. Then she turned to Jack. "I don't want to go upstairs and pretend this was just a talk on the steps," she said. "I don't either," he said. "But I also don't want to rush anything," she said. "I need this to be real, and slow, and honest. Not a night that we have to figure out how to explain in the morning." Jack nodded. "Agreed. So what does that look like?" He thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, the way he thought about things that mattered, not reaching for an answer, but waiting for the right one. "It looks like going upstairs," he said. "Making tea. Talking until we're tired. And tomorrow still being tomorrow, not a different life, not a rewritten story. Just more honest than it was yesterday." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "Tea," she said. "I know where you keep it." "You hate tea. I'll make an exception." She looked at him, this man with his careful rules, and his alphabetized books, and his 3 deployments, and his daughter, who had decided over pancakes that she wanted Emily to stay forever, and something in her expression did the thing it sometimes did, late at night. The thing she'd never fully let him see before. It opened. "Okay," she said for the 3rd time that night. But this time, it meant something different than it had before. She put her shoes back on, stood up, and when she reached out her hand to pull herself up, just a practical, unthinking gesture. Jack took it and didn't let go until they reached the door. Upstairs, the apartment was quiet. Lily was asleep. The television was still on from when Jack had left it, casting low light across the living room. Emily went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, without being asked, the way she did everything in that space, like it was hers, like it had always been hers, because in every way that mattered, it had been for a long time. Jack stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her. She felt him watching. She always did. "Stop," she said without turning around. "Stop what?" "Looking at me like you're memorizing something." "Old habit," he said. She turned around, then leaning back against the counter, with her arms loosely crossed, and looked at him in the low kitchen light. The red dress, the gold earrings, the expression that was tired and relieved and careful all at once. "What are you actually afraid of?" she asked. "The real one, not the Lily answer, not the friendship answer, the one underneath those." Jack was quiet for a moment. "That I'm better at this than I think I am," he said finally. She tilted her head. "At loving someone," he said. "That I'm actually capable of it in the way that it deserves. And that if I do this and I still fail at it," he stopped. "That'll be the answer I can't come back from." Emily looked at him with an expression so full of understanding that it almost hurt to look at. "Jack," she said quietly, "you have been loving people well this entire time. Lily, me in the ways you'd let yourself." She shook her head. "You didn't fail at love. You failed at a marriage. Those aren't the same thing." He stared at her. The kettle began to build. "You said the same thing to me once," she said softly. "About Ryan. You didn't give up. You got walked out on. Those aren't the same thing." He remembered, almost word for word. She watched his face absorb it. "See?" she said, and her voice was quiet and warm and completely certain. "You already know what to say. You've known for a long time. You just keep saying it to me instead of to yourself." The kettle clicked off. Neither of them moved toward it. They talked until 2 in the morning, not about everything that wasn't the kind of people they were. They didn't unload entire histories in one sitting or rush to fill every silence with revelation. They talked the way they'd always talked when it was late and Lily was asleep, and the apartment gave them permission to be unguarded, carefully honestly, in the specific rhythm that two people develop when they've been paying close attention to each other for a long time. Emily made the tea. Jack drank it without complaint, which she noted and said nothing about. They moved from the kitchen to the couch at some point, not by decision, but by gravity, the way the couch always collected them eventually on the nights they stayed up too late. She'd taken the gold earrings out and set them on the end table. He'd finally lost the watch he always wore on base. Small things. The gradual undoing of the versions of themselves they wore in the world. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Emily said. "Not as a game, just as an invitation." Jack thought about it. When Claire left, he said Claire being his ex-wife, a name he almost never said out loud, the thing I felt most was relief. And I've never said that to anyone because it sounds like I didn't care. But it wasn't that I didn't care. It was that we'd been failing each other for so long that the ending felt like... He looked for the word. Like finally being honest. Emily nodded slowly. "Did you love her?" she asked, not jealously, just wanting to understand the shape of it. "I loved who I thought she was when I married her," he said. "And I think she loved who she thought I was. We just turned out to be different people than we'd advertised. And we were both too stubborn to admit it for 3 years." He looked at his tea. "Lily was the only thing we did exactly right." "She's extraordinary," Emily said. "She gets it from her mother," Jack said. Then quietly, "And maybe from you a little, lately." Emily went very still. He hadn't meant it as a statement. Just the truth the way it came out when he stopped filtering. He looked at her, gauging, ready to walk it back if she needed him to. She didn't need him to. "Don't say things like that if you don't mean them," she said. Her voice was steady, but something under it wasn't. "I mean everything I say to you," he said. "That's always been the problem." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled and looked at the ceiling and said almost to herself, 6 months. 6 months I have been sitting 3 feet away from this. 8, Jack said. She turned her head and looked at him. It was 8 months, he said. For me. She stared at him. The 4th of July party, he said. 4 years ago. You made a joke about the souffle. I laughed before I could stop myself, and I thought that's a problem. And then I spent the next 3.5 years making it not a problem. He paused. And then you moved in. Emily closed her eyes briefly. You are telling me, she said, that you have been managing feelings about me since a rooftop party in July. I managed them very well, he said. Until the dress. She opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression that was equal parts exasperated and undone. Jack Carter, she said. Emily Hayes, he said back. She shook her head slowly. Not in disbelief in the specific way people shake their heads at something that is both absurd and exactly right. What do we do now? She asked. We already decided that, he said. Slow. Honest. Tomorrow is still tomorrow. I know what we decided, she said. I mean right now. 11 minutes past 2 in the morning on this couch in this apartment. He looked at her. She was still in the red dress she hadn't gone to change, and he hadn't asked why. Her feet were tucked up beside her on the couch cushion. Her hair had come slightly undone from whatever she'd done with it for the party. She looked, he thought, like a woman who had walked through something difficult and come out the other side and was now sitting in the exact place she was supposed to be. Right now, he said, you should probably sleep. She laughed softly. That's your answer. You've had a long night. So have you. I'm used to long nights. She looked at him for a moment. Then she reached over and picked up the mug he'd barely touched and wrapped both hands around it the way she did with her own. Can I ask you something? She said. You always ask me that before you ask something you've already decided to ask. Can I ask you something? She said again, ignoring this. Yes. When I come home tomorrow? She started, then corrected, later today, when we wake up and Lily makes it chaotic and we're making coffee and doing the normal Sunday thing. She paused. Is it going to be different? Jack understood exactly what she was asking. Not whether the feelings would be different, they both knew those weren't going anywhere. She was asking whether he would retreat, whether the morning light would bring back the rules and the filters and the careful management, and she'd find herself sitting across from a version of Jack that had renegotiated overnight. Yeah, he said. It's going to be different. She looked at him carefully. Different how? I'm going to stop pretending I don't notice when you change the coffee ratio on Thursdays because you think I'm tired. I'm going to stop acting like I didn't rearrange my whole Saturday last month because you mentioned you needed help moving the bookshelf, and I wanted to be the one to help. He held her gaze. I'm going to stop managing it. That's how it's going to be different. Emily looked at him with something that was almost wonder. You rearranged your Saturday. I had plans with Marcus. You canceled plans with Marcus to move a bookshelf. You'd been trying to do it alone for a week, he said. And you weren't going to ask. She was quiet. Emily, he said. I've been here. I've been here for a long time. I just wasn't saying it out loud. A pause. I'm saying it now. She held the mug tighter. Something moved through her face. Something she didn't hide, which was itself a kind of answer, because Emily Hayes. He had learned only let things surface on her face when she'd decided they were safe to show. Okay, she said, for the 4th time that night. Each time meaning something different. This one meant, I believe you. They sat for another few minutes in the kind of quiet that wasn't empty. The city had gone genuinely still outside. The television had turned itself off at some point. The apartment was just the apartment, familiar and warm, and theirs in all the ways neither of them had let themselves call it that before tonight. Then Emily uncurled herself from the couch and stood up, and Jack stood with her because it was late, and the night had reached its natural end, and they both knew it. She picked up her earrings from the end table. Good night, Jack, she said. Good night, Emily. She walked to her room. At the door she paused, not the way she'd paused in the hallway earlier, loaded and uncertain. Just a small stop, a thought crossing her face. Then she said without turning, "For the record, I reorganized your bookshelves because I wanted to put something of myself in the apartment, because it already felt like home, and I was scared of that." She paused. "That's the real reason." Jack stood in the living room. "I know," he said. She went in and closed her door. He stood there for a moment, the apartment quiet around him, and thought that the word home had just been handed back to him with a meaning he hadn't heard it carry in a very long time. He slept 4 hours and woke up feeling more rested than he had in months. That was unexpected. He lay still for a minute and assessed it the way he assessed most things, calmly, without drama. He felt clear. Not resolved, not finished. Not like every complicated thing had been sorted. Just clear. Like a window that had been fogged for so long, he'd stopped noticing, suddenly wiped. He got up, made coffee, stood at the counter in the early morning quiet, and waited for the doubt to arrive, the morning light reappraisal that he'd half expected, the moment where daylight would reassert the rules and he'd start hearing all the reasons last night had been too much too fast. It didn't come. He thought about it. Poked at it deliberately the way you test a bruise, and what he found was not doubt. What he found was something simpler and more inconvenient: certainty. He was still standing at the counter with that thought when Lily came out of her room at 7:43, assessed the situation with the accuracy of a child who had been paying attention to everything her father thought she'd missed, and said, "You made coffee, but you're not drinking it." "Good morning," Jack said. She climbed onto the bar stool, looked at him, looked at the hallway toward Emily's room, looked back at him. "Did something happen?" she asked. "Nothing happened," he said. "You have the face," she said. "What face?" "The face you had after you got back from your last deployment, and you kept looking at the apartment like you didn't believe it was real." She accepted the glass of juice he poured without being asked. "The good version of that face." Jack looked at his 8-year-old daughter. "You notice too much," he said. "You taught me to notice everything," she said. "That's on you." She drank her juice. "Is Emily staying?" "She lives here, Lily." "I mean staying," Lily said, with the emphasis of a person who was not asking what he thought she was asking. Jack was quiet for a moment. "I don't know what that means," he said carefully. "Yes, you do," Lily said, simply, absolutely, without cruelty. He looked at his daughter, this small, perceptive, entirely unsentimental person he'd made, and thought that she deserved honesty in the same way all people who loved you well deserved it. "I hope so," he said. Lily considered this, took another drink of juice, then nodded with the decisiveness of someone closing a meeting. "Good," she said. "She makes the apartment better." A pause. "And you make better decisions when she's around." "I make fine decisions on my own." "Dad, you alphabetize things when you're stressed." Jack had nothing to say to that. Lily hopped off the stool and announced she was going to watch cartoons, and Jack stood at the counter and felt something that it took him a moment to identify correctly, because it had been a while since he'd felt it in this specific form. Peace. Simple, uncomplicated peace. The kind that didn't require anything to be perfect, or finished, or resolved, just present. Emily came out at 8:15. She was in one of his old navy sweatshirts. She'd been borrowing it so regularly that they'd both stopped acknowledging. It was his, and her hair was up, and she was looking at her phone with the slightly squinting expression she had in the mornings before she was fully functional. She walked into the kitchen, looked at the coffee, poured herself a mug, looked at Jack. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he said. She leaned against the counter across from him and looked at him over the rim of her mug. He looked back. It was a different look than it had been yesterday morning, the same kitchen, the same counter space, but the air between them was different. Lighter. Like something that had been holding its breath had finally exhaled. "How'd you sleep?" she asked. 4 hours, he said. "Best 4 hours in months." Something warm moved through her expression. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." They stood there for a moment in the morning light with their coffee. "Lily already interrogated me," Jack said. Emily's eyebrows went up. "What did you say?" "I said I hoped so." She stared at him. "You said what?" "She asked if you were staying," he said. "I said I hoped so." Emily set her mug down on the counter slowly. "Jack," she said. "I told you," he said. "I'm done managing it." She looked at him with an expression that he'd seen on her face before, the expression she had when she was trying to stay measured and practical and wasn't entirely succeeding. Her jaw was slightly tight. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when something was getting in. "You can't just say things like that," she said. "I can," he said. "I just didn't used to." She picked her mug back up, took a breath, looked at the window. Then Lily hollered from the living room. Something about the remote and a very important cartoon situation, and Emily closed her eyes briefly and smiled in the way people smile at things that are both annoying and beloved. "I'll get it," she said. "I know," he said. She moved toward the living room, and Jack watched her go in his sweatshirt in the morning light toward his daughter, and thought that he had spent 2 years building walls against exactly this, and not a single one of them had held. He realized, not sorry about that at all. The day moved the way Sundays do when they're good ones, slowly, without urgency, with the particular texture of a life that is working. They went to the farmer's market mid-morning because Lily had campaigned aggressively for a specific honey vendor. Emily found tomatoes she described as life-changing. Jack carried everything and said little, and watched the two of them move through the stalls, with the ease of people who had figured out how to be in the world together. Walking back, Lily between them, Emily's hand brushed his once. Just a brush, the ordinary near contact of people walking side by side with a child swinging between them. She didn't take his hand. Neither did he. But neither of them moved away. It was enough. For now, it was exactly enough. That afternoon, while Lily napped, she still napped on Sundays. A habit she maintained with impressive commitment, Jack found Emily at the kitchen table with her notebook open. She kept one for recipes, development ideas, things she wanted to try. He'd seen it dozens of times. He sat across from her without asking. She kept writing for a moment, then looked up. "Ryan texted again this morning," she said. No preamble. Direct the way she always was when she'd already decided how she felt about something and just needed to say it out loud. Jack was still. "What did he say?" he asked. "More of the same. That he wanted to clear the air. That he'd thought about reaching out for a while." She looked at the notebook. "That seeing me last night made him realize there was unfinished business." "There isn't," Jack said. "I know," she said. "But here's what I keep thinking." She closed the notebook. "He doesn't reach out for 8 months. Not a word. And then the night I walk into that party, and I'm fine, genuinely, visibly fine, he decides there's something left to say." She met Jack's eyes. "He's not looking for closure. He's looking to know that I'm not." Jack held her gaze. "Are you?" he said carefully. "No," she said without hesitation. "That's what I realized last night on those steps. I'm not waiting for closure. I'm not looking for a final conversation. I'm—" She stopped, shook her head. "I'm done. Not bitterly. Not with unfinished business. Just done." She picked her pen back up. "He can keep the unfinished business. I don't want it." "Are you going to respond?" Jack asked. She looked at him steadily. "What would you want me to do? I told you last night this isn't about me." "I'm not asking what you told me last night," she said. "I'm asking what you want, right now, as the person who said he's done managing things." Her expression was open. "Tell me what you actually want." Jack thought about it. Not long, he already knew. He'd known since he'd read that text on her phone on the front steps. "I want you to block his number," he said. "Not because of me, because every time he comes back in you have to spend energy on something that's over, and I'd rather you spent that energy on something that's starting." Emily looked at him. "Something that's starting," she said softly. "Yeah." She looked at her phone on the table, picked it up, and without ceremony, without drama, without a final response or a closing statement, or any of the things people sometimes think they need before they can let something go. She blocked the number, set the phone back down, picked up her pen. Jack watched her. "That's it," he said. "That's it," she said. "I didn't need to say anything to him. I never needed to say anything to him." She looked up. "I just needed to say things to you." The afternoon light was long in the kitchen. From down the hall, the faint sound of Lily stirring from her nap, the specific pre-wake rustling that preceded the full-volume reemergence by about 4 minutes. They both heard it. Emily smiled first. "She's going to come out wanting food," she said. "She always comes out wanting food." "I was thinking about making that pasta, the lemon one." "She'll want to help," Jack said. "I know." Emily said it like it was the best possible outcome. Jack looked at her across the kitchen table, his sweatshirt, her notebook. The phone turned face down, the afternoon settling around both of them, and thought that this was what it looked like when a life stopped being something you managed and started being something you lived. "Emily," he said. She looked up. "Thank you for texting me last night," he said, "to come downstairs." She held his gaze. "Thank you for coming," she said. Down the hall, Lily's door opened, and Sunday kept going in all the ordinary, extraordinary ways that a Sunday does when everyone who is supposed to be home is home. The weeks that followed didn't announce themselves as significant. That was the thing about the kind of change that actually holds. It doesn't arrive with ceremony. It arrives in increments. In Tuesday mornings and small decisions, and the slow accumulation of moments that don't seem like much until you look back and realize they've built something permanent. Jack stopped going to bed early to avoid the hours when Lily was asleep, and the apartment got quiet, and Emily was just there, present and warm and 3 feet away on the couch. He stopped finding reasons to leave the kitchen when she was cooking. He stopped treating their conversations like minefields he had to navigate carefully. He just stayed. In the rooms she was in the conversations she started, in the life that had been building itself around him for 8 months while he'd been standing slightly outside it, pretending he was just a landlord. Emily noticed. She didn't say anything about it immediately. She let it happen the way you let a good thing happen when you've waited for it long enough with quiet attention, without pressing on it to see if it was real. It was real. She found that out on a Wednesday night, 2 weeks after the red dress. She'd had a bad day. Not catastrophic, just the accumulated weight of a shift that ran long, a recipe that failed twice in testing, and a phone call from her mother that left her feeling scraped out in the specific way that certain family conversations do. She came home at 6:30, and Jack looked at her face and said nothing. Just moved from his chair to the kitchen and started making dinner without being asked. Emily sat at the counter and watched him. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. The same thing she'd said to him 100 times. He said it with the same tone she always used, not dismissive, just a quiet acknowledgement that care didn't require permission. She sat with that for a moment. "My mother asked if I was seeing anyone," she said. Jack kept his eyes on the pan. "What did you say?" "I said it was complicated." "Is it?" he said. "I don't know what to call it," she said honestly. We haven't named it. We haven't had the conversation where we decide what we're doing." Jack turned the heat down and turned around and looked at her. "What do you want to call it?" he asked. She held his gaze. "I want to call it real," she said. "I want to call it chosen, not accidental, not gradual, not something that just happened to us." She paused. "I want it to be something we decided." "Then let's decide," he said. She looked at him. Just like that. "I already know what I want," he said. "I've known for a while. I've been waiting for you to be ready." "I'm ready," she said. "I know," he said. Something settled between them. Not dramatic, no music, no grand gesture, no moment engineered for maximum impact. Just 2 people in a kitchen at 6:30 on a Wednesday deciding. Clearly and finally and without reservation. "Okay," Emily said. "One last time. With everything it had ever meant, plus something new." Jack nodded, turned back to the stove. "How's pasta sound?" he said. Emily laughed, surprised and warm and genuine. Perfect, she said. Lily found out the way Lily found out most things before anyone told her through pure observational inference. She announced it at breakfast on a Saturday morning, approximately 3 weeks after the decision had been made, approximately 30 seconds after she'd walked into the kitchen and assessed the situation. "You're together now," she said. Not a question. Emily looked at Jack. Jack looked at Emily. "Yeah," Jack said. Lily sat down at the bar stool, picked up a piece of toast, took a bite. "Okay," she said. "Okay," Emily said carefully. "I've known since March," Lily said. "March," Jack repeated. "The couch night," Lily said with the supremely casual authority of a child who had apparently been filing information for months. "I woke up when you moved me. I saw your face." She looked at her father. "You had the face." "I have many faces," Jack said. "You have 4, Lily said. "Work face, tired face, something's wrong face, and the 4th one." She looked at Emily. "You were making the 4th one." Emily pressed her lips together very firmly to keep from smiling. "And what is the 4th one?" Jack said with great dignity. Lily considered this with the thoughtfulness of someone choosing the precise right word. "The face you have when you're somewhere you didn't expect to want to stay," she said, "but you do." Jack was quiet. Emily looked at him. He looked at her. There was nothing either of them could say to that. "Can I have more juice?" Lily asked. Jack poured the juice. Emily turned back to the stove and let the smile happen. The first time he kissed her was not on the night of the red dress. It was not on the front steps or in the kitchen or in any of the places the story might have chosen for maximum symmetry. It was a Thursday night 5 weeks in, during a completely ordinary moment. They were cleaning up after dinner. Lily was in bed. Emily was at the sink and Jack was putting containers in the refrigerator, and she said something about a customer at the bakery that day. Some man who'd ordered a specific cake and then complained about its perfection with the specific confidence of someone who had no idea what they were talking about, and she did the voice, the impression, the thing she did occasionally when she was relaxed and trusted you enough to be ridiculous. Jack laughed, genuinely the way he had at that rooftop party 4 years ago before he could catch it. Emily turned from the sink with water still on her hands and looked at him laughing, and something moved through her face, pure, uncomplicated, undefended. He crossed the kitchen. She didn't move back. She didn't look away. He put his hand on her face the way someone touches something they've been careful not to break for a long time, and he kissed her once slowly with the full weight of everything it had taken them to get there. When he pulled back, she had her eyes closed for a moment. Then she opened them. "About time," she said. "I was building to it," he said. "For 8 months," she said. "I wanted to be sure," he said. She looked at him with something in her expression that was wide open and entirely unafraid. "And," she said. "Sure," he said. She took his hand from her face and held it. And that was that. June arrived with the specific gentleness that early summer brings to a life that's finally stopped bracing for impact. The apartment changed, not structurally, not dramatically, but in the way that spaces change when the people inside them stop pretending. Emily's things spread gradually from the guest room into the shared spaces, and eventually into his not rushed, not announced, just the natural migration of a life that had already been pointing in one direction for a long time. One morning, Jack noticed her 3 framed photographs had been hung in the hallway. He didn't know when she'd done it. He didn't ask. He just thought, looking at them, that they looked right there, like they'd always been there, like the hallway had been waiting. Her coffee mug, the cracked one with the gold repair, the kintsugi one, had a permanent spot on the left side of the cabinet next to his. He'd put it there without thinking about it, and neither of them ever moved it. Small things. The architecture of a shared life building itself one ordinary detail at a time. Lily, for her part, treated the entire situation with the equanimity of someone whose predictions had simply been confirmed. She was gracious about this in the way that 8-year-olds are gracious, which is to say, she mentioned it frequently and without mercy. "Emily, you should just use Dad's room for your art stuff. You're always in there anyway," she said one Saturday with the tone of someone suggesting a minor administrative reorganization. "Lily," Jack said. "What?" "It's logical," she said. She has too many canvases in the hallway. Emily looked at Jack over Lily's head with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral. She's not wrong about the canvases, Emily said. You're not helping, Jack said. I'm just saying, Emily said, logistically. Lily looked satisfied, in the way that people look satisfied when the adults around them finally catch up. Marcus came over for dinner in mid-June. He arrived with wine he described as appropriately celebratory, and sat down at the dinner table and looked between Jack and Emily for approximately 45 seconds before he said with deep personal satisfaction, I knew it. You didn't know anything, Jack said. I knew everything, Marcus said. I have known since the rooftop party. I have been waiting 4 years for the two of you to figure out what I figured out in 45 minutes. You didn't say anything, Emily said. Of course I didn't say anything, Marcus said. You can't tell people things like this. You have to let them believe they discovered it themselves. He poured wine. It's the only way it sticks. That's manipulative, Jack said. That's wisdom, Marcus said. There's a difference. He raised his glass. To the two people in this room who made me wait the longest for the most obvious conclusion in the history of friendship. Emily laughed. Jack shook his head. Lily held up her juice glass with great solemnity. I knew in March, Lily said. March, Marcus said, looking at Jack with genuine delight. She's 8, and she had 4 months on you. We're done talking about this, Jack said, but he was smiling. The night that closed the loop came in late June. It was a Friday. The kind of Friday that stretched long into the evening with no particular planned dinner music. Emily put on low in the kitchen, Lily doing a puzzle at the coffee table with the focused intensity she brought to things she loved. The apartment warm and unhurried. Lily went to bed at 8:30. Jack read her 2 chapters. When he came back out, Emily was in the hallway. She was in a dress. Not the red one. A soft, lighter dress summer weight the color of something warm. She was standing under the hallway light, looking at something on her phone, and she looked up when he came out of Lily's room. Hey, she said. Hey, he said. She looked at him. Then, with the particular mischief that had been showing up more in her face lately, the version of her that had stopped being careful about being fully herself, she held the fabric of the dress out slightly in the same gesture she'd made weeks ago in this same hallway. Too much, she said. Jack went very still. He looked at her standing there in the hallway under the warm light in a summer dress with everything they had built surrounding her on all sides, and the question wasn't really a question. She knew it wasn't. She was giving him the moment back. The first moment. The hallway moment that had started everything. But from the other side of it. With nothing unspoken between them. With no rules left to follow, and no walls left standing, and no version of himself left that needed to pretend. He crossed the hallway, put his hands on either side of her face, looked at her, really looked at her the way he hadn't let himself look that first night when he'd only managed 7 words and she'd known what he meant by every single one of them. I never meant the dress, he said. Emily looked up at him with something in her expression that had no name and didn't need one. I know, she said. I've always known. I know you have, he said. I just needed to be the one to say it. She put her hands over his. So say it, she said quietly. He took a breath. I'm in love with you, he said. I've been in love with you for a long time, and I'm done finding reasons not to say it. Emily's eyes went bright, not with surprise with arrival. The expression of someone who has navigated a long distance in the dark and has just stepped into light. Jack Carter, she said. Emily Hayes, he said. I love you too, she said. I have for longer than I admitted to myself, and I'm done being afraid of it. He kissed her in the hallway. Not the first time they were past firsts now, but it was its own kind of first. The first time they'd said it out loud. The first time the words had been in the hallway with them. The first time neither of them had anything left to hold back. When they broke apart, she leaned her forehead against his. The dress, for the record, she said, is not too much. No, he agreed. It's exactly right. She laughed softly. He held her, and, in the apartment on Greystone Avenue, where a Navy captain had once signed a lease for a place to survive in, and not much more. Something that had been quietly, stubbornly, and entirely without permission, becoming a home finally became exactly that. Months later, Lily would tell the story at a dinner table, the way children tell stories about the adults they love with complete authority and slight embellishment. She would say that she knew from the very first morning Emily made pancakes. She would say that her father had the face. She would say it like she'd been the architect of the whole thing, and honestly, Jack thought, looking across the table at Emily laughing at his daughter's version of their history, she wasn't entirely wrong. Some things you plan. Some things you discipline yourself into and control and manage and build, according to rules you spent years constructing. And some things just come home one evening in a red dress, smile at you, like they already know what you're about to say, and wait patiently, steadily, with all the time in the world for you to finally say it. Jack Carter had spent 2 years building walls. It turned out Emily Hayes had never needed a door. She had just needed him to stop standing in the way of one.